The American Cornhole Organization just wrapped up its World Championships in July and is already rebooting for the next season. And here to talk about seasons past and the future of the ACO, we have Frank Geers, who is affectionately called the Father of Cornhole. I think he wears that crown very proudly. And speaking of crowns, we also have with us Gary Ferguson, who was just crowned the King of Cornhole at the World Championships. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, Betsy, thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, well, thank you both. Frank, I will start with you to talk a little bit about the beginnings of ACO. This World Championships, it was World 16. So you've been doing this for a while, but let's go back to the beginning. And when did you think, you know what, this could be like an organized sport? Because we've all played cornhole, beanbag, whatever you want to call the game.
Sure.
When did you say this could be a sport?
Well, actually, I was in the marketing business years ago, and I was always looking for creative ways, Betsy, to promote businesses. So I happened to be at a Cincinnati Bengal game, and I noticed some people playing this game that I really wasn't that familiar with. And I saw these boards and these bags being pitched. And that's when cornhole first came into my life as a form of a way for me to market businesses. I looked at it and said, man, I could put Pepsi Cola's logo on these boards and bags and use these at trade shows or at church functions or whatever. But then as I started looking at it from the marketing standpoint, I realized that people were playing this backyard game and taking it kind of seriously. They were like real competitive about it. And so then I got into the idea of, well, is anybody organizing this beyond just a game in the backyard? And really, there wasn't anybody, taking ownership of that. So I just set out to say, well, why don't I start an organization that, creates a governing body and creates, set rules and regulations and develops a tour. And, the rest is kind of history. The last 17 years is what, I've spent my life, even though my wife cried the first day I told her I was getting ready to go do this and drop my other businesses. I think she's starting to come to the realization that cornhole, did take on the life that I always dreamed that it could, and now it's running like wildfire. And I'm so glad to really be the catalyst that made that all happen.
Yes, and your wife, we should say, is out there on the road with you, and she's helping to promote as well. But it's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to start this organization. I am going to start a tour. It's another thing to actually do it. So how did you go from city to city or from organization to organization and say, hey, we want to hold this in, name a city, Kansas City, and then you have to find cornhole players who will actually play there. So how did you get the nuts and bolts going so that you do have this tour now?
It did not happen overnight. It was a slow process. Each year was a matter of getting a couple more events on board. It was, first establishing the equipment. So we set out to create the best boards and the best bags on the planet. So when I launched the company selling boards that were in upwards of $300. At the time, it was a joke to the world because everybody could make boards in their garage for, $50, $60. And they had no intention of paying $30 for a set of, premium tournament boards. Mm-hmm. But over time, we proved to people that the experience of playing on better equipment made the game more enjoyable. So the first foundation to the company was going out and creating the best cornhole boards and bags on the planet. Then came creating a system, creating a membership-based deal that these members would compete for points, so creating a tour that had regional tournaments as well as these bigger tournaments. So the regional tournaments were tournaments that brought the locals together to compete against each other and earn points. And then the bigger tournaments that we would go in the cities and host was an idea to bring as many of the best players from around the country and the world together to compete head to head. And that was another process. So literally, Betsy, it was just slow, methodical, each year adding maybe another tournament, each year adding a few more members to the organization. we twisted and turned and tried to put, we thought maybe bigger purses were going to be the thing. So there was a year where we spent about $200,000 on purses about 10 years ago. And we thought this was the most brilliant thing. Oh, we're going to run these $20,000 tournaments. We're going to have thousands of people show up because we got a $20,000 purse. But the problem was we didn't. And the reason that we didn't is because by that point in time, everybody knew how good the players were that were developed in the ACO system. So we ran these tournaments, and we were hard pressed to get 100 players to show up for a $20,000 purse tournament. We generated about $5,000 worth of revenue from the event and gave away $20,000 in cash. So 80 people out of the 100 people that showed up and paid to play earned their money back or more. So that was not a good business strategy, but it was just one of those learning curves that we had. And what people don't understand is, all the bumps in the roads that we've had over the last 16 to 17 years growing this sport. But each year we learn something, and each year we get better and better at what we do.
And speaking of being better at what they do, Gary Ferguson walks away with the King of Cornhole Championship. As we mentioned, they just had the World Championship, World 16 in Bradenton. And Gary, you were the winner of that. So let's talk a little bit about your background. How did you get involved in cornhole, especially competitive cornhole?
Well, I was just sitting here listening to Frank's vision that got him to this point where he is, and actually, it's making me think, why didn't I have that vision? Because it was about 17 years ago that I remember me and my wife and kids and family were in the backyard having a cookout, and I saw my neighbor playing that corn bag toss game or whatever. I thought it was a silly little kid game, and I thought that's just such a silly little game. And look at it now. And if I'd had that same vision Frank had, instead of what I thought of it being a silly game, I probably might be talking to him as king of the cornhole world. But anyway, so yeah, a few years later, we were sitting around playing poker. We were getting our weekly poker game together, and my buddy Mike Sykes, his son brings over this set of cornhole boards and bags, and it looks a little bit more sophisticated than I guess what my neighbor had. And so he showed us this game, and I thought, oh, this is a silly little game I saw my neighbor playing. So we played it, and for several weeks before every poker game, waiting on the players to get there. We would get there early, and we would play cornhole for 30 minutes to an hour, and we got better. And so it started to get to you, kind of like taking on golf or something. It starts, you start to like, it's like, wow, this is fun. It's great. So about a month later, we gathered for a poker game, and about an hour into the poker game, we said, let's shut this down. Let's go play cornhole. From that point on is pretty much where we started. And from that day on, we started playing, 12 to 15 hours a day, but only on Fridays. Only on Fridays. We would actually we would always take off work early and come over and play. And we would play up till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. We had lights strapped up on the side of his house, lighting up the whole neighborhood. And then we moved it to a buddy's barn, which is where you see a lot of cornhole being played now, your pole barn deals. My buddy Chris Wall had a big, huge place, so we started gathering there, and then it grew from 5 to 10 to 20 to 30 to 40 something players. And so that's when we start. Of course, we start practicing and getting better and better and better. And then we went to. We thought we were good enough to play at one of these big events, so we went to one in Nashville, and we thought it was going to be an easy win for us. Money. We were already counting. That was me and 3 other guys. So we figured one of us would get first, one would get second, and we would win this money and split it up. Well, out of the 4, I was the worst player, and the other 3 guys didn't want to play with me. So they would actually pull chips from a bag, kind of like we do now in the blind draws, to see who didn't have to play with me. And so I thought, well, that's fine. Finally, my buddy Mike Sykes says, you know what, I'll play with him. I don't mind taking the worst one in the group. So we go to Nashville and we play a tournament. And we just still really didn't realize how good the talent was out there. The players were out there. So we go to this tournament and we're walking in there. And as we're walking by, there's guys throwing bags and they're actually sliding up past us in front of us as we're walking to the booth to sign up. And we're laughing, thinking, these guys can't throw at all. Look, they can't even hit the board. So we go up and we sign up and we get to the first game. And me and my partner barely win. And then we walked and we said, well, I guess the other two guys will win this because nobody can beat them. They walked back over and they said, well, we lost 21-0. They said, you got to see these guys. And so we found out that those bags that were sliding out in front of us were actually going through the hole so clean, they didn't even touch anything. They would slide 6 feet out past the board. And these were guys from Kentucky and places like that that were playing. So that's kind of how I got started in it. Did that for 6 or 7 years. And like Frank said, it kind of died out in this area. So I actually stopped. Playing for about 6 or 7 years. And I ran into a tournament. A buddy called me up and said, hey, there's a tournament down in Clarksville. We need to go play it, see if we still have it. So we go down there and play. We ended up getting second in the tournament because by then, all of these new ACO bags that come out, these different bags, we played with the original ACO bags. Of course, we started with corn bags. Then we went to the ACO bags and we found out that there was a whole new inventory of bags to play, and we didn't know it. So we brought our old ACO bags. we did good with them, but we couldn't finish and win. But from there, I got back into it a couple of years ago, and only last year, this past year, the year I won, was my first year actually even registering and playing in the ACO. First time I ever went to an ACO was Russell Tabors did a big event up in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. I went up there and played, did pretty good. Back then, that was 10, 12 years ago. I think I ended up in the top 20, I believe. But that was the only time I ever played. And even then, I wasn't an ACO member. Last year, Reese Giff asked me to play with him. And I said, well, I don't know if I can make all these tournaments. He says, well, let me lay it out for you. We'll do X amount of majors, X amount of regionals, and we'll get enough points to qualify to go to Worlds. I said, okay. And they said the Worlds are at the beach. I thought, well, my wife doesn't want to sit around all day watching me play cornhole, but she will sit at the beach all day. And there we go. So Frank, thank you for having that at Sarasota at the beach. If you hadn't done that, you would probably be talking to somebody else right now.
Well, actually, it was down near Sarasota. We were in the Bradenton.
Okay. Well, we were at Sarasota Beach, and that's all that mattered. I could get to Bradenton wherever you were. I knew I had to get there. That was the bottom line.
Well, Frank knows beach. Okay, when he's planning ahead, he's got to think beach now. So literally, Gary, you went from worst to first, the king of cornhole now. So when you went into the World Championships of Bradenton, did you think, yeah, I could win this? I mean, was that in your mind that you could win it?
I played a lot of those guys there. The top, I felt like some of the top players in the world. I played Tanner Halbert. I played Josh Glover, Kyle Anderson. I played all those guys that I thought would be there in the end. There was a couple I hadn't played, like Caleb. I think I played Austin in a doubles game one time, and always done well playing against them. I've won a few times. I've beaten. I felt like I've beaten the top players that gave me the confidence to go and play and win it. And my whole deal, I guess, was like a lot of my friends would say, which is why I kept harping on the fact that Jerry Armstrong kind of stayed by my side all day because he believed in me and he knew it. And a lot of other people did too. But his job, or he felt like his job was, if I keep you focused, he told me somebody had asked him who did he think would win. He says, Gary Ferguson. If he stays focused and he doesn't have too many Jim Beams or fireballs, he could win this. and desire to do it. And every time I would come up, when I got to the quarterfinals, I told Jerry, I said, hey man, I said, that's great. I'm gonna get $1,000. I'm in the top 5 in the world. This is great. I'm going back to the beach. He goes, no, you can win this. I said, okay. So then of course I won the next game against Cole. And I thought, wow. I went over to Jerry. I said, wow, I'm going to finish second in the world. This is crazy. And Jerry goes, no. He goes, you need to stay focused. You can win this thing. And so I pulled out everything I could in the final game to stay focused and realize, hey, I can play just as good as these guys. I just had to stay in it mentally, which is what I think most of this game is. Once you learn the fundamentals of throwing, I think there's I don't know, anybody in that tournament could have won it if they could stay focused and play their best game. So yeah, I did think that I could win it. I just wasn't planning on it.
Well, Frank, it's got to make you feel good to hear Gary's story about how he came from being a recreational player to growing into the King of Cornhole and an ACO member. But at the World Championships, you had hundreds of players. More than half of this country was represented. You had veteran players. You had brand new players. You had men, you had women, you had kids there. Seeing the players that you have right now in the ACO, where would you like this sport to grow?
Betsy, it was over 450 players competing in the singles, and it ended up being 30 plus states. We had more players sign up later in the months there as it came closer. But this sport is definitely going to take off worldwide. It already has. We've had players competing with us from Australia, Germany, Canada. We've got people talking with us from Italy, Poland, Brazil that are looking at coming on board. My feelings, as they've always been, and people have laughed, but I think fewer people are laughing these days. But I believe that someday that this silly backyard game is going to become the world's most recognized and popular sport on the planet. And the reason that's being said is that it is so easy to get involved with this game. Real quick, a story to tell you is probably 15 years ago, early on in this game. This game has been spread a lot through our military men and women, and I appreciate everything that they do for us. Because there's a lot of times where they have a lot of downtime, so they're looking for stuff to do. Well, cornhole is such an easy game to make and build. You can just get a board with a hole in it, and you can get a sack. You can get a sack of rocks and pitch them. Well, we literally have some footage from some men and women from the armed forces that would literally take socks, and they would put pebbles in the socks, tie the end of the socks, have a board with a hole that was cut in it, lean it against a cinder block, and they were playing. That was their version of cornhole. And that's why this game is going to take over the world someday and be the world's greatest sport and most played sport on the planet, because anybody and everybody can play it, whether you're 8 or 80, black or white, male or female. And that's one of the greatest things I love about the ACO, Betsy, is that, the one division that we have, which is the world singles, and we crown a world champion, we allow men and women to compete head to head against each other. While we have not had a female player yet win the world championships, they have come very, very, very close. And it used to be that our world championships was referred to as the King of Cornhole. But back in I think it was season 8 in Charleston, West Virginia, none other than, we had a woman by the name of Stacia Pugh that ended up finishing 3rd in the women's, or in the singles. She had won the Queen of Cornhole that year, which was the women's division. She had come over and finished 3rd out of 330 some odd singles players. And at that moment, we knew we couldn't crown her King of Cornhole. So we ended up changing the name of the game to be the World Singles Title, right? And if a man wins it, they're crowned King of Cornhole. And if a woman wins it now, they're crowned Queen of Cornhole. So we only have each year one representative for the ACO. It's either going to be a king or a queen that is recognized as the best player on the planet that year. And this year, it just so happens to be a King of Cornhole, and it's our King Fergie, Gary Ferguson there. But no, that's what I love about this game and love about this sport, and that's where I see it going. It may be in the Olympics someday. I imagine it will. There's another big push to try to get it there. Years ago, there was a documentary put together on it that it went out and got 10,000 signatures, to put the start of trying to put the thing into the Olympics. But I love the game. I love the way it brings people together. I love the fact that it's so social, easy to play, and safe and portable.
Gary Ferguson, who is the King of Cornhole, and Frank Geers, the father of what you can say now is the modern cornhole game and the ACO. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Gary, congratulations. And World Series will be coming up pretty soon here next July. It will be in Branson, Missouri, so we'll do it all over again. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Betsy. Thanks, Frank.